For many, smoking starts as innocent curiosity, a small escape, or a way to feel in control, to belong. But what begins as a casual habit gradually turns into a heavy and inevitable routine. Why does no one talk about this realistically? After all, what lies behind the attraction to cigarettes, vapes, or any nicotine source that momentarily eases stress but leaves deep marks on the body and mind? Maybe no one has told you that with each puff, the body charges a toll, in the form of fatigue, dependency, or even something more serious. And if there were a clearer path, a way to understand and undo all of this, perhaps quitting wouldn't seem so impossible. This conversation isn't just about cigarettes. It's about the freedom that's been held back by them. There's something fascinating about the first cigarette many people try. For some, it brings an immediate sense of calm, a momentary escape from the pressures around them. It feels almost like a small magic trick. The act of lighting up, inhaling, and exhaling smoke creates a feeling of belonging, of being in control. And so, a simple cigarette, which seems harmless, becomes a symbol of power, a kind of ritual. It's interesting how, for many, this cigarette starts as a harmless distraction during a work break or after lunch. But what begins as quick relaxation can evolve into something much deeper. What few people realize is the role nicotine plays in this fascination. It works fast, like a shot of energy and concentration in just minutes. Imagine someone who, after hours of studying or a tense day, decides to light a cigarette to take a breather. At that moment, the nicotine enters the body and activates receptors in the brain, releasing dopamine, a chemical that brings pleasure and motivation. This is the same mechanism that generates that feeling of being in control. But over time, the brain becomes accustomed to it and starts demanding higher doses until the habit turns into a need. And so, without realizing it, the person begins to repeat the cycle more and more. The cigarette goes from being a strategic pause to something essential, something that can't be missed. In moments of anxiety, for example, that calming drag becomes indispensable, a true refuge. It's as if, over time, the smoker is tying themselves to an invisible pleasure drive, carried in memory and triggered whenever stress appears. But with that, the line between control and addiction becomes ever thinner. When nicotine enters the body, it's almost like a switch in the brain. It activates a powerful chemical response that releases dopamine and brings that feeling of satisfaction. Initially, the smoker experiences mild euphoria, a kind of fleeting well-being. For someone seeking relief, this feels like a gift, but soon that comfort proves temporary. The brain, always adaptable, begins to ask for frequent doses to maintain that state. Smokers soon realize that without cigarettes, that feeling of fullness seems absent, creating a subtle and relentless dependency. What's curious is that nicotine also reduces hunger. Imagine someone trying to balance their diet and, amid this, turns to cigarettes to control appetite. Deceptively, they end up believing cigarettes are an ally. After all, they feel less need to eat and feel lighter. However, this masks an imbalance. By interfering with the brain's pleasure and hunger circuits, the habit starts to reprogram the body, now confusing addiction with appetite control. And this cycle doesn't end there. It only deepens, demanding more with each attempt to satisfy the dependency. Over time, this repetition affects the brain's tolerance. What once was mild excitement now needs higher doses to have the same effect. This adjustment, known as tolerance, turns what was a choice into a daily obligation. Now, without the constant presence of nicotine, the smoker's brain resents it, missing that artificial compensation. Dependency starts to control even emotions and mood, creating a cycle that goes beyond the will to smoke. Here, addiction is no longer just physical. It has also ingrained a psychological need that's hard to ignore. Each drag carries an invisible load that gradually infiltrates the lungs. Cigarette particles, the infamous tar, begin to accumulate like a layer of toxic dust. It's a residue that the body fights to expel but struggles with. The cilia, those cells meant to sweep out impurities, become overloaded and lose efficiency. Slowly, respiratory capacity decreases. Those who notice that climbing stairs becomes a challenge or that coughing appears out of nowhere are experiencing the first sign that their lungs are calling for help. And the problem doesn't stop there. The alveoli, responsible for exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide, also suffer. They, which function like tiny air sacs, begin to harden, making deep breathing difficult. Think of a sponge that's lost its absorbency. That's how the lungs of a smoker become. Breathing fully becomes an effort, and in more severe cases, it can lead to diseases like emphysema and chronic bronchitis. It's not uncommon for smokers to feel short of breath with minimal exertion, as if their body is being deprived of something essential. As the lungs lose efficiency, the body feels the impact. Imagine wanting to run to catch a bus or play with your kids at the park and realizing your breathing can't keep up. These symptoms may seem distant to someone starting to smoke, but they become real as time goes on, like a gradual toll. Over time, that initial sense of freedom and power turns into a prison for the body, which cries out for relief with each new attempt to breathe. And, in a way, it's just the beginning of the impact cigarettes will have throughout the body. The heart, just like the lungs, is under constant pressure with the habit of smoking. Every cigarette brings with it a load of chemicals that directly harm blood vessels. Over time, artery walls begin to suffer tiny damages, forming scars and narrowing. This causes a domino effect. Blood has to pass through narrower pathways, forcing the heart to pump harder. And this extra effort, repeated over the years, can lead to a series of heart problems, from high blood pressure to more severe diseases like heart attacks. To better understand, think of a pipe that gradually builds up sediment. The flow, which was once free, now faces barriers, and the pressure intensifies. In the body, the result is similar. Smokers experience the effects not only on cardiovascular health but also on their energy levels. Walking long distances, for example, becomes a challenge, and activities that once seemed simple now feel like a tremendous effort. Even an everyday task, like climbing a hill, can make the heart race and pound, a clear response to the strain that cigarettes put on blood vessels. And it's not just the heart that suffers. The blood also becomes more prone to forming clots due to artery damage. This risk of thrombosis and even a stroke increases as addiction prolongs. It's as if the body itself is rebelling, trying to send warning signs with every beat. This set of factors puts the smoker in a cycle of vulnerability, where the heart, the engine of the whole body, has to fight against the effects of each new cigarette. Thus, addiction leaves marks beyond what's visible, deeply affecting the circulatory system. Time seems to move faster for a smoker's skin. Every drag brings substances that attack collagen, the protein responsible for keeping skin firm and elastic. Thus, wrinkles and early signs of aging appear. And it's not just about looks. The immune system itself weakens with constant exposure to cigarette toxins. Imagine the body as an army meant to defend health, but now weakened, no longer able to fight off invaders with the same efficiency. Even minor infections, which once passed almost unnoticed, now find an easier path to develop. The damage goes beyond the skin. Hair and nails are also affected, becoming weaker and losing their shine. Many smokers are surprised to notice that their hair becomes more brittle or that their nails take longer to grow. Beauty, often seen as a reflection of health, is one of the first external signs that addiction changes. And it's interesting how, over time, small changes accumulate, forming a picture that goes beyond aesthetics, touching the body's overall resistance and vitality. The immune system, constantly bombarded by toxins, loses strength. Opportunistic diseases take advantage of this vulnerability, and the body begins to get sick more often. Colds, flu, allergies. These illnesses become frequent visitors, as if the body is left defenseless. For smokers, this loss of vitality is almost imperceptible at first, but soon the signs become unavoidable. Thus, the body gives clues that smoking affects far more than just the lungs or heart. It directly touches the body's ability to protect itself and stay young and resilient. Time is a cruel ally for those who smoke. Over the years, the body accumulates the marks of every cigarette, each toxic particle inhaled. This accumulation doesn't happen without consequences. The risk of developing chronic diseases rises, and the shadow of cancer becomes a real threat. After all, constant exposure to harmful substances gradually wears down the body, compromising systems that should protect against tumors. That's why many smokers discover, too late, that their lungs or throat already bear the invisible scars of addiction. The list of diseases linked to smoking is long: emphysema, chronic bronchitis, and, of course, lung cancer, one of the most relentless. Many think their chances of developing such a severe illness are low, but reality is quite different. Just looking at the statistics reveals that smoking is one of the main causes of this kind of cancer. Even non-smokers exposed to secondhand smoke face these risks. Every puff is like another step down a line that invisibly shortens as addiction deepens. And cigarettes don't just mark the lungs. Other organs like the bladder, pancreas, and even the mouth are also exposed to the effects of these toxins. The immune system, already weakened, struggles more to combat cancer cells that quietly begin to multiply. The combination of addiction and illness becomes a heavy cycle, impacting not just the body but also the mind, which suffers with the awareness of its own state. Thus, cigarettes create a domino effect, where each part of the body is gradually affected. Overcoming addiction is a challenge that goes beyond the physical. It's an internal struggle between wanting to quit and actually managing to. Cigarettes often intertwine with social moments, daily habits, and rituals that seem harmless. Imagine that morning coffee that always comes with a cigarette or conversations with friends that call for a puff. These scenarios create a web of psychological dependence, making the idea of quitting daunting. For smokers, nicotine is no longer just a substance. It becomes a presence, almost like an old friend accompanying each routine. The complexity of addiction becomes apparent in attempts to quit. The body can handle the absence of nicotine in just a few days, but the mind is stubborn. That cigarette break, which seemed like a quick distraction, now reveals an emotional weight. Many who try to quit realize how cigarettes were part of their identity, their daily routine. And this creates a dilemma: how to reshape life without this companion. Strategies like replacing cigarettes with another habit, such as chewing gum or taking a walk, are good alternatives to fill these empty moments. But the real battle lies in the decision to stay strong, to keep saying no even when the urge to return is strong. It's not an easy path, but each step brings significant benefits. The key is to seek support, whether from friends, support groups, or even professional help. After all, quitting smoking is not just a decision. It's a process, a daily reclaiming. And it's a process that gradually reveals the freedom hidden behind addiction, encouraging a new life that goes far beyond cigarettes. Now, with everything you've learned about what smoking does to your body and mind, the choice to change is in your hands. Imagine what you could do with renewed energy, with the freedom of not depending on this habit. Have you considered the impact that one choice today could have on your health tomorrow? What if, instead of a puff, you took a step toward a lighter life, where each breath is complete and full of vitality? And if each time the urge arises, you remember all that you're gaining by saying no? So, tell me, are you ready to free yourself? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue on this journey and find real ways to regain control of your life and health. Let's do this together.